In this week's video, I'll be going over one of my new favorite lenses, the Sony Sonar T-Star FE 35mm f2.8 ZA. Saying this lens is quite a mouthful for me, so from now on, I'm just going to refer to it as a Zeiss 35mm f2.8. Though not to be confused with the Zeiss Loxia 35mm, which is a manual lens. I've had the Zeiss 35mm f2.8 since the beginning of the year, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I was never too into the 35mm focal length, but this lens has made me more comfortable with it. In this video, I want to highlight one major reason why I decided to get this lens as opposed to the other options on the market, as well as other reasons that help solidify my purchase. There are a bit of negatives as well for this lens, which weren't too big of an issue for me honestly, but more on that later. First, I'll go over the positives. As soon as you pick up the Zeiss 35mm f2.8 lens, you'll immediately appreciate its incredible lightweight design. Weighing in at just 120 grams. Let me repeat that, 120 grams. It is one of, if not the lightest and smallest lens available for the Sony E-mount. This compact size and weight was the main reason why I was interested in this lens, and one of the major factors as to why I even bought this lens. Paired up with either my Sony a7R5 and my Sony a7 IV, the combined weight of both the camera and the lens is around 770 to 850 grams. To put that into perspective, the Zeiss 55mm, which is one of the lightest and smallest lenses for the Sony E-mount, is 281 grams, which is double the size and weight of the Zeiss 35mm. That's crazy when you consider how small the 55mm lens already is. This means wherever you're going, either taking photos and walking on the streets, or traveling to your next destination, this lens won't weigh you down whatsoever. This allows you to focus on capturing those remarkable moments without any hindrance or worries of whether you want to bring the lens or not. It's only 120 grams and almost nearly a pancake lens as well, so you can easily fit it somewhere in your bag. Whether going on a walk around LA or traveling to a location like I did in Hawaii, I always had the urge to bring this lens just because of how light it was. And because I brought this lens almost everywhere with me, I was able to get very comfortable with the focal length. Now let's dive into how sharp the Zeiss 35mm f2.8 lens is. There's not really much to say about it, besides the fact that this lens has some crazy good optics. So you can expect some incredible sharpness and good image quality. Even with how old this lens is, it still doesn't disappoint in 2023. It was good when it first came out, and it's still good right now. Whether you're capturing landscapes or doing some street photography, this Zeiss lens doesn't mess around when it comes to clarity and detail. Even with how lightweight the lens is, it doesn't sacrifice in terms of image quality of the lens, so you don't have to worry about that, which for me is a huge deal, as image quality is as important as the weight and the size of the lens. Very quick thing to start off is that the lens might perform differently on older bodies and whatnot. But on the a7 IV and the a7R5 that I use at least, when it comes to autofocusing, the Zeiss 35mm f2.8 lens has not been a letdown whatsoever. Its advanced autofocusing system is quick, accurate, and reliable, allowing me to capture moments without having any worries. So that gives me great confidence, whether I'm photographing quick subjects out on the street or focusing on still life subjects like people sitting down. This lens can still keep up with the vision I have in my head, ensuring that it won't hold me back from missing the shot. The autofocusing locks on my subject swiftly and accurately, allowing me to maintain focus. This lens provides the speed and precision I might need to capture images with confidence. And also a big part if you shoot video as well, the focusing is silent, so you won't have to worry about the lens focusing making any type of noises in your video, which some lenses may do. Finally, let's talk about the exceptional build quality. The build is top notch. It's made with light metals, which I personally enjoy more than plastic because of the premium feel to metal, as well as the durability of the lens. So I definitely do understand when brands decide to make a lens made of plastic to keep the weight down. With this lens though, they somehow have gotten the best of both worlds, with the lens being made of metal while at the same time keeping the weight super lightweight. In addition to that, this lens is weather sealed, so you can take it out in rainy conditions without worrying about water ruining your shooting experience. With the negatives I've seen out there about this lens on the internet, people have talked about the vignetting of the lens, the barrel distortion, or the lack of stabilization. But those aren't too much of a problem since you can fix the vignetting and distortion in post with the program like Lightroom. With the lack of stabilization, if your camera has IBIS or in-body image stabilization, then you won't have to worry about that. Instead of those negatives, which you can read about elsewhere, I want to talk about what I think would be the biggest negatives most would have with this lens. The first big negative is the maximum aperture of this lens. As the lens suggests, you can only go to f2.8. For me personally, that's not too big of a deal, as I wanted this lens more as a walk-around daytime lens. When I do street photography at night, I lean more towards my 55mm, 85mm, and my 24mm, which are all f1.8 and above. But for those who do want the 35mm focal length and want to shoot with it at night, this might be a deal breaker for you. You can still get some great night shots with this lens, though it may be a bit more difficult than if you were to have a lens with a max aperture f1.8 or 1.4. You can look at the Sony 35mm 1.8 or the Sony 35mm GM 1.4 if you need that option. With those, you get to let more light in due to the max aperture of 1.8 and 1.4, but with the trade-off of being a bigger and heavier lens. That's for you to decide which is more important to you. The second negative is the price. For being such an old lens, the price at retail is still $598, which is a bit crazy to me. But this is a really easy negative to get around. Because the lens is so old, you can actually just buy this lens used for a really good price from sites like KEH or MPB. I personally got mine at MPB because it was cheaper than the used ones on KEH. I paid around $284, which is more than half the price off. At around $300 or so, this lens is a steal in my opinion. For me, I don't mind using a used lens as it's a great way to save money, especially in photography where things like camera bodies, lenses, filters, and whatnot can all add up real quick. More than half my lenses are used, and they've all been perfectly fine, and I intend to keep buying used since it saved me so much money up to now. So if you don't mind buying used, then this negative isn't actually a negative. It might actually be a positive. Overall, I've really enjoyed my time with this lens. Before using this lens, I actually had the Sony 35mm 1.4 GM, and I sold that to get this lens. There was nothing wrong with the 35 GM, but I noticed I never really took it out when shooting. It probably was due to the fact that I leaned more towards a 55mm when shooting, and also due to the weight of the lens. Why I even bought the 35 GM is for another day. But with the amount of money I saved from selling it and buying the Zeiss 35 f2.8, I was able to use that money to prepare for future travels as well as get other things I actually needed. There are way more things I like about this lens than things I don't like about this lens, which is really just the maximum aperture. But that's a trade-off I'm willing to take if it means having a lens this light. Let me know in the comments if you also enjoy this lens, or if you're interested in buying it. Or I don't know, maybe you hate it and you think I made a mistake in choosing it over the 35 GM. Let me know about that too. I'd love to read some of your opinions. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next week. Later.